be spewing so much higher. This place is going to be like a sauna by the time I'm done. With the time that we have, I'm going to try and give you an overview of the changing demographics of Minnesota, but I also want to extend myself and my team as a resource for all of you. You know, probably I know a lot of you in this room already. We've worked together in the past, and you've probably worked with regional analysts across the state. We still exist. We're still happy to help in any way that we can. So please feel free to reach out. Like, this is just kind of scratching the surface here, trying to give you guys some big picture ideas. I work in the Labor Market Information Office. We are primarily located in St. Paul, but we also have the regional analysts who are stationed throughout the state, and so you know that we do a lot of different things. But ideally, we are providing you with data that you can use to help make decisions and help do smart strategic planning. So right now, we are actually understaffed. We are down one person. Our Northwest analyst actually changed to be the workforce strategy consultant. He still works for Dine. So then our Northeast analyst, Eric White, is now moving to Northwest Minnesota, and we're going to rehire in Northeast. We're going to start working on that project. But even in the meantime, you always have access to regional labor market analysts wherever you are located in the state. So I thought it would be fun and kind of interactive to ask you guys some questions as I'm going through. You can certainly ask me questions as well, and I'll do my best to try and answer them for you. So how many people do you think live in the state of Minnesota? Like, what's our current population?
3.8 million.
3.8 million, that's a good guess.
5.5.
5.5, that's an even better guess. 5.2? Yeah, 5.6 million. So we are just over 5.6 million. Now, of those 5.6 million people, how many do you think live outside of the 7-county Twin Cities metro area, what we call Greater Minnesota? The Greater 1.5, yeah, we're pretty decent around that area. It's 2.5 million. So it looks like there's moonshine or maple syrup or something. Whoever got that. It's like a door prize. So a little over 3 million of people live in the Twin Cities metro area. The rest live out here in Greater Minnesota, which is greater for multiple reasons, right? And I can say that because I live in Greater Minnesota. So of those 5.6 million people, how many people, or what percentage do you think are under 18 years of age? So still in school age.
Born after 2001.
Born, yeah, 2001. Anybody want to take a guess? Like, what percentage, what of our population do you think is in the youngest age groups? 20%? Yeah, it's actually a little bit higher than that. It's 23.2% in the state of Minnesota. Now, do you think we have more people that are 65 and older, or less people that are 65 and older? Yeah, it feels that way, right? I got bad news for you guys. It's the opposite. Really? Statewide, it's about 16%. Now, in Greater Minnesota, there are probably some counties where there are more people that are 65 and older versus people that are 18 and under. But as of right now, we still have more young people than we have old people. But the population is definitely shifting that direction, and I'll break that down a little bit more. So out of those 5.6 million people, how many do you think are in the labor force? Like, how many actually have jobs or are actively seeking jobs right now? Well, yeah, half is a good guess. It's actually a little bit higher because Minnesota has a really high labor force participation rate. So we have about 3.1 million workers statewide. That's from September 2019. And again, some portion of those, the largest portion of those are in the Twin Cities metro area, but about 1.4 million of them are in Greater Minnesota. All right, final question for you guys. What do you think is the largest employing industry in the state of Minnesota? Which industry has the most jobs? Yep, healthcare. Yep. So healthcare is number 1, manufacturing is number 2, retail is number 3. So those are all really good guesses. All right, so the high helicopter look. Minnesota's economy is very strong. We have really low unemployment rates. We have over 3 million workers, and of those 3 million workers, usually around 90,000 to 100,000 of them are currently unemployed, and it fluctuates a little bit by month, but for the most part, we have really low unemployment rates, and so that's creating some very tight labor markets. In fact, right now, statewide and in most of the regions in the state, there are fewer than 1 job seeker for every vacancy that's currently posted by employers. And so that creates a really challenging situation for a lot of employers. Like the primary constraint that we have to more growth is because we don't have the people to fill the jobs that are currently available. And it's only going to get worse starting to see a lot of baby boomer retirements happening. One thing that's really nice about the state of Minnesota is we have a very diverse economy, so not all of our eggs are in just one basket. We have employment spread across a lot of different industries. So healthcare is the largest. It's about 17% of total employment in the state, but manufacturing is big, retail trade is big, accommodation and food services, educational services, all those different areas are big, and right now they are all seeing growth. Whoa. So in this current economy, how do we help everyone succeed? Like, how do we help match up what employers are asking for with what our current job seekers are doing? So to try and make it even more interactive, if you guys have your phones with you, you can just take them out quick, and before you start playing Candy Crush, open up your text messaging program, if you will. There's a software called Poll Everywhere, and you'll see we have no access to your phone number, so you're not signing up to get spammed by Indeed after this presentation. This is just to find out your take on what's happening in your area. So the key part is, you're going to, on the next slide, I'll show you there's a set of codes that I want you to send into this 22333 number. So instead of sending it to your spouse or your kids or whatever, you'd send it to 22333. So let me ask you guys a question. How dire is the workforce shortage in your community? So if you feel like it is serious, we don't have enough workers to fill the jobs that we currently have, you would type the 323118 and send that. Oh, perfect. You guys are, this is a smart crew. I should have known that. So if you think it's serious, that'd be the top one. If it's just okay, like employers are seeming to find the workers that they need, but maybe it's taking a little bit longer than they were hoping. Or maybe it's not that bad, like maybe your employer isn't really complaining or seeing any issues. And I'm assuming you probably are getting feedback from employers in your communities telling you that, you know, this is a serious issue. So it looks like the majority of people are saying it's a pretty serious issue. Awesome. So demographic trends statewide. So Minnesota, again, has about 5.6 million people. That makes us the 22nd largest state, and that's kind of where we've been for the last couple decades. We actually just got passed by Colorado. Now, I don't know what's going on in Colorado, but all these people are moving there. They are one of the fastest growing states in the U.S., and now they actually just surpassed. They do seem to have a new industry. So in the state of Minnesota, of course, the growth is happening at different rates. So Twin Cities is the fastest growing part of the state. Greater Minnesota, though, is also seeing growth long term. The components of the population shift are changing. Obviously, our population is aging. You guys were all thinking that there's more 65-year-olds than there are 18-year-olds, and that certainly is going to be an issue moving forward. But if they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, I'll give you both. But this chart shows this is the baby boom generation in 2000. This is the baby boom generation now. So you can kind of see how this chunk moved through, and this is for greater Minnesota here. If you break it down by actual generations, statewide, the largest generation is actually Generation Z, which is the 0 to 17-year-olds, like the current generation. And I don't know if that's what the final name for that generation is going to end up being, but as of right now, we hear Generation Z. Statewide millennials are the largest generation, and that's true in a lot of counties. The Generation Z, though, is slightly larger than the baby boom generation on a statewide basis, but it definitely varies by region. And so right now we actually have 5 generations working together in the labor force at the same time, possibly 6 generations. There might be some people still from the greatest generation, silent generation, that are still in the labor force, although that number is declining pretty rapidly. So this population change has been pretty uneven. Half of the counties in the state are losing population, half the counties are gaining population. What do you think was the fastest growing county in the state so far this decade? Hennepin? That's the largest growing. How about the fastest growing? So Stearns? No, it's not Stearns. No? No?
Rock?
No? All those are really good guesses. Not Rock, no. It's actually Carver County has been the fastest growing. Scott County is second fastest. Wright, Hennepin, and Washington County. So you can see in this map, you know, a lot of the population growth that's happening in the state right now is happening in the Twin Cities metro area and that first metro fringe. But you'll see that there's also growth happening in other parts of the state. So like this is Blue Earth down here. This is actually Nobles, not Rock, but close. So what do you think is the fastest declining county in the state? Kuchiching, that's a good guess. Yeah, Lac-La-Parle is right. So Lac-La-Parle is actually the fastest declining county, followed by Renville, Lake of the Woods, Traverse, Kitson. And you can see that in general, a lot of the fastest declining counties are touching the Dakota. So it seems like there must be something with the Dakotas that are negatively impacting Minnesota somehow. I'm just going to blame it on them. So what's interesting is I had shown the slide that millennials are the largest generation in the population and in the labor force overall in the state. But if you start looking at regions and at counties, you see that a different breakout happens. Baby boomers are actually the largest generation in 8 of the 13 economic development regions in the state of Minnesota and 54 of the 87 counties. So there definitely are some places like Aiken County. There are way more people that are 65 and over than there are people that are under 17. Our demographics are also changing in terms of racial diversity. So statewide, our population is about 84% white. Now that's less diverse than the United States as a whole, but we are becoming more racially diverse over time. Greater Minnesota is less diverse than the state as a whole. Obviously the Twin Cities are the most diverse part of the state in terms of race. So Greater Minnesota is about 92% white, and there are lots of counties in Greater Minnesota that are still 97% white or more than that. Now that being said, a lot of those counties are actually losing white population and gaining in population of other races. So even if they are small numbers, the percentage increases have been huge across the state, and almost every county is enjoying that kind of population increase. Statewide, the white population increased 4.5%. Since the turn of the century. The population of other races increased almost 72% during that same time frame. So, and a lot of different race groups actually doubled during that time frame. Hispanic or Latino, Black or African American, Asian, all of those different race groups increased incredibly fast across the state. If you look at the components of population change, you can have a natural rate of increase, which means that you have more births than deaths. And most of the counties in the state of Minnesota are still in that situation where they're having more people are being born than are dying. And so you see natural increase that way. However, there are some counties and some regions where that number has already turned the opposite way, where it's a negative natural rate of increase. And then we also have in-migration and out-migration, like people can move in or move out. And of course, some people are moving out of the state of Minnesota, moving to other states, maybe Colorado. They have the same seasons, but they have something that just keeps drawing people there. So our statewide, we have domestic out-migration, like more people are moving out of Minnesota to other states than are moving into Minnesota from other states. But we have international in-migration, which means that people from foreign countries are moving here in much larger numbers. And so that's been a really positive impact on our population and our labor force. If you look overall, Minnesota has about 450,000 foreign-born residents. That's about 8.2% of our total population, and primarily they are coming from Asia, Latin America, and Africa. And Africa has actually seen the fastest increase so far this decade. That's where we're gaining the most new residents from. Greater Minnesota, again, obviously is less diverse than the Twin Cities metro area, so we have about 95,000 foreign-born residents in Greater Minnesota. That's only about 4% of the total population. And one of the things that Cam and I had talked about before this is how do we become a more welcoming community for groups that are moving in from foreign countries and can immediately start contributing to our labor force. You'll also notice that the percentage increase for foreign-born residents from Africa was increasing way faster in Greater Minnesota than what we see statewide. One thing that's been really nice about the immigrant population is that it tends to be younger than our native-born population. So you can see in the chart there, almost half of the foreign-born population is between 25 and 44 years of age. And that is the group that has the highest labor force participation rates of all of those different age groups. And so obviously this has been a big boom for our labor force. The state of Minnesota as a whole added about 80,000 immigrant workers between 2010 and 2018, compared to about 57,000 native-born workers during that time frame. So if we hadn't had people moving in from other countries and joining our labor force, we would have been in even more dire straits in terms of a labor force shortage. Now there can be some challenges for people who are moving in from other countries, like maybe their educational attainment is not at the same level as the native-born workforce, and also maybe their language isn't the same. So you can see almost a quarter, like 1 in every 4 foreign-born residents has less than a high school diploma, and so that severely limits their job options. There's only so many jobs that you can take that require a high school diploma or less. But you'll also notice that foreign-born residents have a higher percentage of people with a graduate degree. So there are also some extremely highly skilled immigrants that are coming in and taking jobs within the state, within all of our regions. One of the other challenges that might come up is the ability to speak English. So of the foreign-born residents in the state, about 40% say that they speak English less than very well. And so, one of the things that employers might need to do to be a little bit more flexible is to change how, like maybe workplace English skills training classes, or changing the job so that they can help workers with some of those barriers come in and take those jobs. The labor force overall is still growing, which is a really positive thing. So again, a little over 3 million workers in the state of Minnesota. That's up from about 2.8 million workers back in 2000. So the long-term trend is upward, but the rate at which it's growing has changed pretty significantly over time. So in the 1990s, when the economy was kind of in the same spot we are now, like things are going really well, we're adding jobs. We were adding about 40,000 new workers per year. Well, that made it a lot easier for employers to find the talented workforce that they need. Then during the 2000s, of course, we had 2 recessions during that time period, so it became less of an issue that we weren't growing as fast in terms of labor force because there were fewer jobs available, and the people who were being laid off a lot of times had stable work histories and good resumes and good skill sets, and were able to fill the jobs that employers were trying to fill. And now, so far this decade, again, the economy has been growing, we've been adding jobs and looking for workers, but we aren't adding them nearly as fast. Right now we're adding about 16,500 net new workers per year, which is less than half as fast as we were adding workers during the 1990s. Same deal if you look in grade